Well, I'm feeling good here, man.
Yeah.
I'm feeling pretty great that Rahm Emanuel's going to have...
It's so funny. What the hell, man? What? I couldn't believe that when I saw that.
Dude, who is this? What does he have? What does he have?
Well, he's clearly got a lot of experience with Japan.
This guy, he must know.
He's a weeb, actually. It's a little known fact, yeah.
What does he have over somebody that, allows him to continue on this failing up?
I mean, Biden owes him a personal favor, probably. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, ambassadorships typically are, kind of make work.
Sure, yeah.
Fake things. Because, I mean, the actual diplomatic missions in those countries are usually, not spearheaded by the ambassador. That's my understanding. I could be totally wrong here, but it's usually the people who are actually at the embassy who are working there locally, who are not rotated out with every whatever political appointment, who have, are the ones who are
Is Callista Gingrich still the ambassador to the Vatican?
Oh my God, good question.
She's not, actually. Apparently she's not. Haha. Who is it now? Let's see.
Is it me?
Some other fucking...
I totally forgot.
I had to get a good Catholic in
some
there.
other Catholic sicko who just happens to be a Democrat rather than...
I asked if Pat Boone was available. Turns out he's Episcopalian. But doesn't the Senate have to vote on ambassadorships?
Patrick Connell is now the ambassador to the Holy See.
Jesus, and he, how much did he donate to the?
Great question.
Biden
Let's see, who is this fucking sicko? What's going on with him? He was a recipient of several State Department superior and meritorious honor awards in 2015. Mm-hmm. So,
well, that's something.
Yeah. So it looks like he's some sort of Obama holdover fucking freak.
He was a career member of the United States Foreign Service, and previously served as deputy chief of mission at the embassy. So he's just, oh God, who are these people? Why are they allowed to do these things? I mean, most of the fucking ambassadors are just. I think I remember early on in the show we talked about even just looking at ambassadors as individual topics.
I was actually thinking about that earlier today. I remember that discussion. We considered doing that for an episode early on. Wasn't there some documentary that one of you had watched that we that you'd brought up?
The Ambassador.
I think
yeah.
Hang on, I'm looking at his wife's Instagram.
There's a whole underworld of fake ambassadorships essentially that are sold. Because you can use that position to conduct a bunch of business dealings abroad, right? Without the same legal restrictions, and it's typically Europeans and Americans doing this in areas in the global South where they have business interests, or they want to set up some horrible neo-colonial fucking empire or whatever,
right? So
that you can there are these mediating brokerages that will charge you a few $100,000 basically to get a free to do whatever kind of license, so that you can travel, you can avoid customs and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but that's also that's the whole point of the State Department, having embassies all over the world is to hey, we're gonna hook up, fucking United Gypsum with this local gypsum guy that owns a mine or something like that in fucking Algeria or some shit.
Right? Yeah.
Who's laughing?
That's me laughing. Come on now. Who else would it be?
I don't know. It's what the fuck? Why do these people get this? And of course, it's because the same thing with fucking Louis DeJoy, our fucking postmaster general. Yeah, no logistical experience or whatever previous to becoming postmaster general, but he gave Trump $1.2 fucking million, which is exactly how he got into the position. But fucking Rahm Emanuel, I mean, he was chief of staff for Obama. Then he became mayor of Chicago. The through line for this, I just can't fucking figure out. And now he's ambassador to Japan.
The really great one I always think about in this sort of thing is remember Michael Brown, Bush's FEMA administrator, who his job before that was the commissioner for the International Arabian Horse Association. That was his.
Fuck, dude. Fuck.
By the way, I don't like this Patrick Connell guy. I don't trust his face, man.
There's something
this
about
Instagram picture you posted in the Discord.
You don't like it?
I don't like him.
I don't like it either.
Yeah.
No. Who the hell knows what he's getting up to in the freaking Vatican?
Yeah, do
they live in the Vatican?
There's real sick shit that happens there. I believe so.
Or they live in Rome.
I guess they live in Rome. I don't know.
Can you
Let's
imagine
get Callista Gingrich on the show and ask her about it.
That's right. Poor fucking Newton, who's just like ballooning 20 pounds from being there and eating pasta all day. They give you such small portions. I hate all these people, dude. I fucking hate all these people
freaks,
so much.
Every single one of them.
They fucking hate it.
Yeah.
They fucking suck. They don't deserve to be there, and they should give us each $10,000.
Now when I was a young boy, about the age of 5, my teachers taught me I could be the greatest man alive. They told me I could change the world, be whatever I wanted to be. There was no one in the world like me. Every one of us was so unique. I'd not be an average man. No sir, I'd be no average man. So I had those big dreams.
Welcome back, everyone, to Eat the Rich. This is a show about our political economy, late-stage capitalism, and the millionaires, billionaires, and multinational corporations hell-bent on staving off its death rattle. I'm Dwight, and today we have with us Shane. Sounds like George Lucas at the end. And we have Chris.
Ahoy, ahoy.
Chris, I literally was like on a bike the other day laughing about how you described that sound that George Lucas made. I believe you said that he meow.
It's a meow. It's obviously a meow. I don't know what else you would describe it as.
Thank you for doing this.
Thank you for doing this.
I do it every day whenever Carrie says like, "Oh, did you take the trash down? Thank you." I'm like, it's 10 times a day. It's never gets old.
Oh my goodness.
Oh man. So anyway,
not relevant at all to what we're discussing.
Except we are talking about billionaires. I suppose is the tangential through line there. So the point is this episode we would like to talk about a disgusting, sickening private equity firm called KKR.
The KKK.
No.
I said that out loud last night when I was trying to talk about them. Yeah, it just sort of came out. KKK just sort of came out, and it's fitting, I suppose. I don't know.
Well, it's the point that put this in my mind is something that we're going to talk about, a specific leverage buyout that they did that just left many people without a job, and so I've had it in my mind for a long time to talk about KKR because you can see like there's just certain, and especially for people that like the vast majority of us that like just don't think about these large, enormous private equity firms that are frankly controlling much more of our lives than we would probably care to admit. It's like you can't even like get your head around it, like how powerful they are. And the sick part is they operate relatively quietly, and it's so weird because the fact that they dictate such a high percentage of our lives as far as like our commute times and where we're employed, if we're laid off, and the quality of products and goods and services that we interact with our economy is for the most part operated and by these private equity firms that are working on behalf of their weird shadowy investors, and fucking cascade of family offices, people that have never even gotten close to touching their billions that they've just inherited, and this is the people that are in charge of doing it. And what's so sick about it is like you'll hear about it tangentially, like on CNN. We all heard like some of the big layoffs and stuff like that happened with Toys R Us, which is one of the big case studies that we're going to be talking about today. But it's like, oh, there's actually a driving force. But it's not just something that happened. There's a driving force behind it. And like there's somebody is profiting off of all of this. And KKR was one of those things that, had come across my desk a bunch of times. And I was just like, man, I can't like stop thinking about this company. And so I thought it would be worth some time, worth one of our weeks to look into it and understand, like, look at it as a case study for private equity and understanding like how specifically they operationalize just the complete, like, they just chop shop companies. They just buy and strip.
Yes.
It's pretty fucking bad. So KKR, let's learn about it a little bit. Chris, I'll turn it over to you to talk about its the characters behind it and its origin.
Sure. So yeah, I've got sort of just a sort of bird's eye view, sort of overview here of the of the company itself and the guys who founded it. It was founded by Jerome Kohlberg Jr., Henry Kravis, and George Roberts. And I watched this this on YouTube. This it's from the channel Bloomberg Quick Take. And they have like a 25-minute overview, mostly of Henry Kravis. And the title of this video is called "The Henry Kravis: How the Corporate Titan Rocked Wall Street." And so it's but yeah, as far as these guys and like their personal lives or any stuff like that, they're all pretty sort of secretive. There's not a whole lot out there about any of them. Kravis is sort of the one that has the most sort of information out there about him, but this Bloomberg video sort of just gave an overview of the company's history, particularly focused on this guy Henry Kravis. I was delighted to find, and I sent you guys a screenshot like 5 seconds into the video. I was delighted to find out that Trump is interviewed in it.
Yes, dude.
Wonderful. The video was made 7 years ago. It's really funny because like they'll be interviewing like several guys. Like there's a bunch of people who they keep going back to for like different segments for their interviews, and like the other guys will say like sort of like more smart sounding like sort of analytical stuff about like the company and what the company's doing, and then they'll cut to Trump and he's just like, Henry's a great deal maker, he's great at raising money, he actually pioneered raising money back in the 80s and like stuff like that. It's really good.
A fun button on that too is that I think didn't Kravis give a bunch of money to Trump?
Yes, he did.
When he became president or something.
Well, Trump wanted to nominate him for Treasury Secretary.
There you go.
I love
but
it.
apparently, supposedly Kravis turned it down.
Yeah, he donated $1 million to the inauguration. Mm-hmm. That was it. Mm-hmm. That was it.
Can you imagine? I mean, for him, it's fucking pocket change. I get that. But it's just fucking insane to me.
$1 million. This has to be a great, great party for the president.
Isn't there? There's several other people that we've discussed that have donated, I think, exactly $1 million to the Trump inauguration.
Fucking Louis DeJoy, $1.2 million.
Yeah, that's right.
Lou, I just wanted to call you and thank you personally. You did a great. I think there's a lot of opportunity for you to perhaps be inside of my administration. You put on a great party. I love the Jell-O. You had Jell-O for dessert. I like lime. Lime is very good. Find it's good for digestion. I remember you put out the chicken tenders, which I really enjoyed. We should get together. We should get together on the perhaps you go hit the links together. I got a great new girl that she's bringing cocktails around. I know you like the cranberry and vodka, so I don't drink, but perhaps you can come out. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Chris.
You're fine. Anyway, the Bloomberg video is really good. Like and I love finding stuff like made by Bloomberg or Forbes whenever we like about the people that we cover on the show, because the Bloomberg video, it's like it's almost like it's success. It's like an inspirational kind of like just like rags to riches type story about these three young go-getters from rich families who
there was no rags.
They all met while working at Bear Stearns, and while working at Bear Stearns, they went on to follow their dreams and left and built their own company, and that's where they are today. But this guy Kravis and Roberts, Henry Kravis and George Roberts, they're cousins actually, and they met this other guy Jerome Kohlberg at Bear Stearns when they were all working there in the late '60s. And Kohlberg was about he's dead now. He's the dead one.
Thank God.
He was about 20 years older than Kravis and Roberts, and was like sort of like a mentor to them at Bear Stearns. And so these three guys in the late '60s and early '70s sort of pioneered what they called bootstrap deals, which would later become known as leveraged buyouts. And Dwayne, I'm sure you'll be able to offer a better definition here, and feel free to hop in. But like a leveraged buyout or LBO is basically just like fucking just stripping a company of its assets and then like borrowing money against the value of those assets and selling the assets off to pay back the loan. The use of debt cost less than using equity, so it serves to sort of reduce the cost of financing the acquisition. Did you have anything else to add to that, Dwight?
That's about the size of it. It was fucking insane, right? Like, it's so crazy. You use the company that you're buying. Like the company is giving you money to buy it from itself is basically. It's so fucking bereft of any fucking morals. It's just so crazy. Anyway, please continue.
But the Bloomberg video talked a little bit about this, but like the fact that early on, like the sort of companies they were targeting was sort of like family-owned businesses, like mid-sized businesses that were like facing succession issues. Like if the fucking CEO or whatever had like their founder didn't have anybody to pass the company on to, and they were too small to take it public. They didn't want to sell out to like their competition or something like that. So these guys would step in and like, basically strip the company for parts and do the leveraged buyout on it. So they start making these kind of deals their bread and butter, and they bring in what was at the time the largest fee for a deal in the history of the company, in the history of Bear Stearns, which I'm sure has been surpassed by now, which was $950,000. And eventually they start to kind of like butt heads with the management at Bear Stearns because they wanted to kind of like have their own thing. They wanted to start like a fucking like leveraged buyout department at Bear Stearns or whatever, and the company Cy Lewis, the executive, wasn't going for it, and so that's when they go off on their own, and this is in 1976. This is when they go off on their own and start KKR, Kohlberg, Kravis, and Roberts, and the Bloomberg actually. At this part in the Bloomberg documentary, they say with a completely straight face, they say some shit like armed only with their novel idea to make money and $400,000 from backers to cover their overhead, they set off to make their own way.
Unreal.
There's some shit like that.
The straight face, yeah, exactly. Like you said, like the straight faced way in which they say it is inexcusable.
It's so good, man. I love that shit. But anyway, so throughout the 80s, they get more and more dependent on using junk bonds for their leverage buyouts. Kohlberg ends up leaving the company in 1987, and he goes back to I guess what the rest of them were doing originally, which is sort of targeting these like family-owned mid-sized businesses or whatever. And then the other guys, Kravis and Roberts, then they're sort of left as the sole owners and heads of KKR. And this is right before their big buyout of R.J. Reynolds Nabisco, which was I believe in 1988, which we're going to be getting into here in a little bit. And then that's sort of where the company has been from there, with just these two guys at the helm of it. Kohlberg, he ended up going his own way and starting like, I think it's like Kohlberg and Associates or some shit, like his own company with just his name on it until he died in 2015. As far as the like the personal lives of these guys, there's not a whole lot really out there. Henry Kravis seems to be the most known, but he shies away from interviews. And like I said before, he's a longtime friend of Donald Trump, and he did donate a lot of money to his presidential campaign, donated a lot of money to his inauguration, and Trump was considering nominating him as Treasury Secretary back in 2017. In fact, I think that he asked him two separate times. I think this was Trump's first choice, and for whatever reason, it didn't happen. There was a documentary made on. There's a couple articles about this from back in 2007. There was a documentary made about Henry Kravis personally, called "The War on Greed," starring the homes of Henry Kravis, which is done sort of satirically in the style of a Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous episode, while juxtaposing Kravis's lifestyle against that of working class families and stuff like that. Because Henry Kravis is known again, and this is the kind of thing that Trump would always go back to whenever he was interviewed in the in this video. In that Henry Kravis very much sort of was sort of symbolic of the greed and the excess of the 80s and stuff like that, and of course Trump remembers that sort of thing fondly, but Henry Kravis sort of having that sort of image, that's That's why they went on to sort of to use him as the sole example in this documentary that was made about how awful these private equity firms are. He was sort of like the face that they put on it. One of those homes, by the way, here's a little bit of more recent news. One of those homes that Kravis owned was a ranch in Colorado that he sold just last year to Michael Bloomberg. for $44.79 million. Hold on, let me find the article about it. There's a little bit more information about the ranch itself here. Where is it? It is a 4,600-acre ranch in northwest Colorado, known as Westlands. It's located about an hour's drive from Aspen, so you can maybe figure out where it is. Let's see. Oh yeah, so Kravis bought the house he bought the property in 1991 for $5.5 million. Sold it in 2020 for $44.79 million. The main house on the property is 19,000 square feet. It has 5 bedrooms, a wine cellar, a theater, an indoor hot tub. It has a swimming pool. It has its own golf course. It has a tennis court, a helipad, a helicopter hangar, 2 large guest cabins, and a carriage house. Additional outbuildings for staff, horses, and ranch support facilities.
Like that's like I can't get my mind around it because like how many days per year is he actually going to be there? And like, do they have full-time staff just sitting there twiddling their thumbs, waiting for like, the week and a half that he's going to be there? Like, that's crazy. Like, that's a crazy prospect to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, so when I read about this ranch in Colorado, it got me thinking about another famous rich person who also had a ranch out in the American West. And I was thinking about Jeffrey Epstein, who had his New Mexico ranch. And wouldn't you know it, I did a little bit of Googling, and this may come as a surprise, but Henry Kravis does appear in Epstein's Little Black Book.
So really?
Yes, he does. So I'm sure there's nothing suspicious about that. And by the way, speaking of Epstein, another little connection there. Kravis's wife, his current wife, he's been married several times, but his current wife, Marie Jose Kravis, just this year in April was selected to be the new board chairman at the MoMA, at the Museum of Modern Art, after Leon Black had to step down because of his Epstein ties. So, it's just every one of these people you could play like the 6 degrees of separation between them and Epstein, and it's usually more like 1 degree or 2 degrees. So yeah, I mean that's what I got. That's what I got about these guys. There's not a whole lot of information about the other guys. Kravis is the one that has the most information out there about him, and the little bit of information we have is that he's a rich sicko and a friend of Donald Trump, and I'm just going to assume also implicated in all the Epstein stuff. I'm just gonna go ahead and make that assumption and broadcast it as well. So.
Oh wait, I just really quick because I'd kind of come up against this very briefly, but I didn't really look into it. But as you were talking about his wife, Marie Jose Kravis, I guess is how you say it.
I have no idea. Yeah,
assuming. She also she's a columnist at a couple of different places.
She's like an economist, right?
Yeah, and she's written for the Wall Street Journal in their opinion column, and there's this piece here from 2017 by her called "The Great Productivity Slowdown," and it's about I'm just sort of skimming it, but it seems to be about how like the economy is not as dynamic as it once was, and blah blah blah, and when you get to the conclusion here, I just saw tax reform come up a bunch of times, and how tax reform needs to incentivize more capital spending and investment and blah blah blah. So basically, when she's not like taking over board positions or whatever in various make work philanthropic places, she's writing opinion pieces about how we need to tax the rich less or whatever.
Right. She's writing on behalf of the Ayn Rand Institute of Economics.
Right.
Like Chris, like what you were saying about the nature of what they do with their business with the leverage buyout is exactly that. It's like it's taking a company that may be in distress, maybe not in distress, but by and large typically would be in distress. I believe it's called like debt investing or some shit, and just bilking it for all it's worth. like I said beforehand, one of the case studies that I learned about this where I first heard about KKR was from this Toys R Us. If you're a millennial, like I'm sure at least half of everybody that listens is, this is Toys R Us, a fucking toy store. Like it was a large chain toy store where they sold, shit with lead paint or whatever. And I want to read from an article, and we might read a lot of this, which to me just says it all. And I literally wrote in my notes in in all caps, "This says it all." And it's a fascinating article that was from Fast Company from 2018 from September, and it's entitled "Why Work Has Failed Us Because Companies Aren't Sharing the Profits." And anyway, I'll read from this, and it was written by Cale Guthrie Weissman, and the sublead here is, as the demise of Toys R Us shows, people at the top are constantly finding ways to extract all the value from companies while leaving nothing for workers. And in my humble estimation, I think that there's probably a lot of sympathies that Cale Guthrie Weissman has, with broadly leftist views, and I'm pretty sure that that's the case from a reference that he makes later on in the article, which we'll highlight. But I'm going to read through it now, and stop me if you need to. But let's get through this, because I think it says it all to me. A year ago, she was a store manager at a Toys R Us. Today, Anne-Marie Reinhardt Smith has become a minor online celebrity. Not to say that everyone knows her name, but she's become the lead for many a story, and now this one as well, written about the store's recent bankruptcy and all of the employees they left high and dry. 33,000 to be exact. That's 33,000 employees that were laid off as a result of this leverage buyout. Her history with the company, as well as the way that it unceremoniously dropped her and thousands of others, hints at the larger narrative about how the intersection of business and labor has changed over the years. I worked there for 29 years, Smith tells me. She had been at the toy store through good times and bad, rising from human resources manager to store manager. When word came out about the new store cuts late last year, she felt at least a little prepared. Smith had seen layoffs at Toys R Us before, and every time her colleagues were given at least a little bit of severance. But this time, the company announced it was going bankrupt and no severance was being offered. Smith was shocked. They had never not given severance packages, she tells me. The shocks continued. A few months later, the store began its liquidation, which ultimately led to every store closing. Now, it wasn't just some layoffs, but the entire workforce. And with the exception of executives who were given a sizable golden parachute, now axed Toys R Us employees were given nothing. They were expected to simply stop working and apply for unemployment. Which, again, I'm just going to pause here to say, it's just so clear that, when we learn about this mechanization of the leverage buyout, that it puts the cost of, taking care of workers that are being laid off onto the state and onto the rest of the taxpayers, and not on the fucking billionaires that own these leverage buyout firms and pay nearly nothing in taxes. It continues, stories like this are not uncommon, and while they sometimes generate some outrage, private equity deals that strip companies of their assets and leave the workers with nothing are just one particularly egregious part of a larger trend, that the value created by companies is being shared with fewer and fewer people. While the stock market continues to grow, wages have stagnated. There are a myriad of causes, but they all point to one problem: investor greed. Private equity firms buy up companies they think can quickly fix and extract returns from. Boards then increase the pay of CEOs while saying that they can't afford to raise wages, and companies are offering shareholders billions in stock buybacks instead of reinvesting returns into a company and its employees. And I'll say this too, and I read this from another article about the Toys R Us leverage buyout, is that they go on to say, and we might talk about this in this article here, but they go on to say and I remember this too, and I'm sure you guys have remembered this, whenever there's one of these large companies or a stalwart of our youth that we remember going to, everyone's like, oh, it's Amazon, No one's going into brick and mortar stores anymore. It's just because everyone's lazy and they don't want to walk or take their car to go out. They just want to sit and wait, and 2 days later, wherever it is, it's gonna open up. And that's not the case at all. And in the case with Toys R Us, as they explained in this other article that I was reading, they were like, yeah, Toys R Us never even reinvested in its own stores. Even things like floor tiles were just being worn down and just kind of looks shitty, and they just didn't reinvest, because reinvesting would mean that you're taking away money from executive compensation, stock buybacks, and otherwise, shareholder dividends and shit. Anyway, continuing on here. When I talked to Smith, she bluntly described the days that led to losing her job. And she also talked about the system that she believes led to the situation. Private equity firms had bought the retail store in a highly leveraged buyout in 2005. The firms Bain Capital, KKR, and Vornado Realty Trust purchased all shares of the company for $6.6 billion. And this is the fucking part that blew my mind. The firms put down only a small down payment of that sum and had Toys R Us take out $5.3 billion of debt to finance itself being purchased. I'm going to say that again. All the shares were bought for $6.6 billion, okay? $5.3 billion of which was bought by Toys R Us itself, which it took debt out on itself to be able to buy and then sell to the companies that are buying it. Like, that's, I read this, I had to read it like 7 times over, because I was like, there's no way that like, what am I reading here? That doesn't fucking make any sense. And it doesn't, because it's not something that does make sense. It only makes sense if you think about it. That's like, this is legal? This is allowed to happen? That's fucking nuts. It continues here saying, this is how the entire private equity system works. A firm or a group of firms look out for struggling companies they believe can quickly fix and make a return. They purchase them, forcing the businesses themselves to accrue insane debt loads to be, quote, saved by the private equity firms. And then the firms implement sweeping changes to make their money back, usually massive cuts and pay freezes. A common effect of private equity buyout is liquidation. If the company can't keep up with its interest payments or isn't able to create a big enough profit, the firms will sell the organizations for parts. This is still often considered a success for shareholders because they made a return. So again, like, one of the biggest things that they, the biggest, line items on the cost sheet that they manipulate is the people, the workers, the amount of people that they employ. And I'm going to give some more examples later, but that's exactly where they start out. A number of companies were purchased through leverage buyouts. PetSmart, which is still saddled with an enormous debt, Payless Shoes, which filed for bankruptcy in 2017, and Mervyn's Department Store, which left over 30,000 people without a job after going bankrupt and closing its stores. And the firms doing these deals have long been considered predatory capitalists. And I remember this too. Tell me if you guys remember this. In 2012, Barack Obama ran a series of ads tying Mitt Romney to Bain Capital,
yes,
the private equity firm he ran for decades. Oh God, it was so good.
It's a good thing Obama doesn't have any ties to anything like that.
No, and that's the great thing is that when he got paid several $100,000s to do Wall Street talks, he said, guys, you know that you can't do this. You shouldn't be doing this, and then took his paycheck. For Toys R Us, the private equity reality was especially stark, even before it filed for bankruptcy. When it was first bought out, the retail store was instantly riddled with financial difficulties given the high interest payments it had to pay to the debt load. Again, it financed itself and took out debt to afford being bought, which, again, I still can't fucking wrap my arms around. These payments, which grew thanks to more debt amassed over time, amounted to more than $400 million every year, more than the company's yearly profit. And that's what ultimately brought the store down, leaving Smith and the tens of thousands of others without a job or a safety net. That a private equity-induced debt load killed Toys R Us is only part of the story. The other part is how leverage buyouts hurt workers all along. There's a stark difference between how employees, the people who came in every day to sell the company's products, allowing it to have any profits at all, were treated before and after a consortium of investors took over the company. The moment the store was bought out some 10 years ago, says Smith, everything changed. In an attempt to milk as much money out of the organization as possible, many positions were axed almost instantly. They kept cutting off payroll, expecting one person to do the job of two people. And this is a common private equity expectation. These investments aren't to build scaling, thriving businesses, but to eke out as much profit for as little money as possible. Private equity investments are short-term mad dashes to make the investors richer. Says Smith, not only were fewer people working at the stores, but employees instantly saw wages decrease. Toys R Us would normally give employees a yearly wage increase of anywhere between 25 to 75 cents per hour, depending on performance. Once the buyout happened, the raises then began to dry up. There was one year that I got a 7-cent raise, she said. Oh. The human resources person charged with telling Smith about her paltry raise was embarrassed to have her sign her new salary. Can you fucking imagine that? How much is that? If it's, let's say you work full-time, 40 hours a week, that's 2,000 hours per year. A 7-cent raise would yield you, and this can't be right, would yield you an additional $140 per year. Holy shit, dude. That's so fucked up. This rise of leverage buyouts coincides with wage stagnation. Though many politicians point to the current bull market, along with, again, this is 2018, along with healthy unemployment statistics, the truth is that it's never been tougher for the American worker to make ends meet. Numbers from the Pew Research Center show that the average wage Americans make has nearly the exact same purchasing power it did 40 years ago. And again, this is, something we talk about all the time, how real wages haven't changed for 40 years since, the ultra financialization of our economy starting in like the 1970s. And what makes matters even starker is the fact that wages are going up for some, the top earners. And it quotes here, it says, meanwhile, wage gains have gone largely to the highest earners. Essentially, the current moment American workers are in is one of stagnant wages while the rich get richer. God, if they even had any idea like what would happen 2 years later under fucking COVID, where it was just like the hyper polarization of our fucking income tranches. In fact, numbers from the Bureau of Labor Statistics show that when taking inflation into account, the wages of production and non-supervisory workers have actually fallen this year compared to the year before. This is not because companies are tightening their belts. Corporate profits as a share of the national income are near the highest they've been since 1970. According to numbers tallied from the AFL-CIO, the average total compensation that a CEO at an S&P 500 company brings in is $14 million. Meanwhile, the average non-supervisory worker makes only an average of $38,000. There are, of course, a number of factors contributing to this: shareholder dominance, the slow demise of unions, and more. And examples like Toys R Us indicate the impact private equity deals can have on large workforces. Here, we have another story of thousands of layoffs after years of cutting costs. Smith's story alone shows how worker wages can fall while executive and shareholder profits can increase. And then this is what blew my mind, like reading this, is that he brings up as an example, like how Elizabeth Warren, and this was true, like she proposed a plan that said that, it mandates more workers on corporate boards in large companies. Of course, that went nowhere, that doesn't exist. But then he talks about encouraging more worker cooperatives, and he talks about, and he cites, the author here cites the Democracy at Work Institute. That's, Richard Wolff's organization that has gazillions of podcasts and puts out an enormous amount of content talking about the development of worker co-ops. It's extremely powerful, obviously, blah, blah, blah. We all know about this. But again, like this, and I want to drive this point home, and I'm going to read from this here, where they're talking about driving down wages, which is so crazy to me. Imagine working somewhere for years and all of a sudden your wages go down. Data has shown that private equity and leverage buyouts have a negative impact on employee wages. A study from 2009, one of the only ones that looked at the intersection of labor and private equity, found that companies taken over by private equity saw decreased earnings per worker in the years after the firms had taken over. Meanwhile, productivity increased. This, wrote the study's authors, illustrated that private equity firms are increasing the gap between productivity and earnings per worker. So, again, this is like an anecdotal okay, no, hang on. I want to research. I want to just close this out reading one more part of it. It says here, for Smith, her change in circumstances has led to this new activist role. She's been working with organizations like the Center for Popular Democracy, as well as other fired workers, to make their stories known. Smith has taken her message across the country, lobbied hard for changes, and even met with politicians like Bernie Sanders, and her work is now beginning to pay off. Both Bain and KKR are beginning a dialogue with displaced workers about potentially creating a family fund, which would essentially give severance to those impacted by Toys R Us liquidation. There's nothing to protect us workers in these situations, she said, and so this development would be one way for employees impacted by leverage buyouts to have some sort of safety net. It hasn't happened, for the record. It didn't happen. Now we are, a few years down the line. It did not happen. So again, I really wanted to use this as an example to like explain, exactly as a kind of like narrative format how this actually happens. And if you look up, and I was just like, out of curiosity, I just like Googled KKR layoffs, and there's just like a few examples here. This was something that came out in 2019. It says, Axel Springer plans layoffs after KKR becomes the biggest shareholder. And it just says, it was a German company, Axel Springer, is planning layoffs as part of a cost-cutting program that would mainly affect its newspapers. It doesn't only sound like one big cut in jobs, it is one. The cost-cutting plan comes 1 month after U.S. private equity firm KKR became the company's biggest shareholder. So they don't waste any fucking time. They're taking their money and their investors' money and they're putting it to work almost immediately. 1 month after purchasing this company, they just fucking gut it. Here's one I read from, this was from 2020. This is from a Wisconsin periodical called the Post-Crescent, and it's titled, it's the Appleton Post-Crescent, Appleton, Wisconsin. It's titled, 42 employees will be cut in Fleet Farm warehouse closure. Fleet Farm is a distribution center in Appleton, Wisconsin. And it reads here, Fleet Farm's 42 warehouse employees will lose their jobs in January when the company permanently closes its Wisconsin distribution center at 1300 South Lindale Drive. Fleet Farm sent a letter on November 13th to the Wisconsin Department of Workforce and Development saying the job losses will take place between January 14th and January 27th. In an April 2017 Post-Crescent story, Fleet Farm confirmed that between 150 and 200 jobs would eventually be cut or transferred from the Appleton warehouse because it was building a new distribution center in Chippewa Falls. And where does this tie in? The company was previously called Mills Fleet Farm. It was founded in 1955 by a father and two sons. The family sold the company to New York investment firm KKR in January 2016 in a deal estimated to be worth more than $1.2 billion. So Chris, this is how I'm reading this is like, this is exactly like the classic KKR example to take like, here's a family company that had been built up over the years. Mm-hmm. And for whatever reason, the family may be disinterested in, continuing its management basically. And so they sell it. They sell it out. And as a result, the people that have been, and again, this was built in 1955. So it had survived 60 years in a local community. And again, Appleton is a town of only 74,000 people, and they're losing hundreds of jobs as a result of this one fucking leverage buyout. Like that fucking blows my mind to me. But again, they're coming in and immediately after owning the company, they're just stripping it for parts. So, in general, I just want to read too, as you were talking about before, Chris, when we read about these motherfuckers in like Forbes or Bloomberg, like the way that they talk about it, there's a reason, as you'll find out in a few minutes when Shane starts talking about, one of the case studies here, there's a reason that this article titled is Gentlemen at the Gate. With trillions pouring in, KKR and its peers must build up.
I saw that one, yeah.
Rather than break. Yeah. Oh, fuck me,
I saw
dude.
that one, yeah.
And so I'm not going to read all of it, but I'm just going to read a portion of it, which I think is very telling, just like as far as where our, current political economy is in existence, which is, it reads here, KKR's first 5 buyout funds from 1976 to 1986, so 10 years, returned 4 to 17 times their money. So if you were an investment in one of these 5 funds, depending on which one it is, you either made 4 times the amount of money you put in or 17 times the amount of money you put in. It continues to say, but today, there are hundreds of private equity firms. Worse, the financial and operational maneuvers that buyout firms pioneered are now basic blocking and tackling for corporate CFOs. Since 2002, no KKR buyout fund has returned more than 2.4 times its money. And it continues to say here, let's not delude ourselves, says John Scaravum, the chief investment officer of the $100 billion Oregon State Treasury, a KKR investor since 1981. This is getting much harder. That was a very dense sentence, and I want to just explain what that means. This guy is the chief investment officer for the Oregon State Treasury, right? So they're probably investing like pensions and making sure that the pension fund can grow. And one of the ways that they do this, and this is often used a lot, which is, these state institutions will look to put their money into a diversified portfolio of investment products, one of which would be like private equity. And he's just saying, like, I've been giving money to KKR since 1981, but their return on investment isn't as good anymore. So again, the state is giving money to KKR private equity, which then uses that money to buy companies and fire people and strip them of the parts. And that's a return on investment. And he's saying, like, well, it's too bad that they can't do it super effectively anymore because it's not returning as much. And then it continues to say, as George Roberts, this is, the R of KKR, says of the leverage buyout game, there's no art in it anymore. What's relevant is what you're going to do with the business. And I want to use that as a springboard to make like a larger point about this, which as I read this portion of this Forbes article, I read that as an example of a Marxist principle that he has talked about, which he didn't invent it. This was also like Adam Smith talked about it. But it's called the tendency of the rate of profit to fall. And basically what that means is over time, the amount of profit that you can make just in general, decreases. And like if you think about what's happening in the American economy, and as this is a case study as an example, like they're saying, yep, it's getting harder and harder to, make a buck by firing people. Like even in like the most exploitative and fucking just Gordon Gekko fucking greedy sort of, greed is good sort of, environment that they made a name in. Like even then they're just like, it's not as easy to make a buck anymore. And so I read this as saying that like, this is, in an economy which is starting to hit those kind of like plateaus in the curve of like, profits and shit. They're just going to continue to do more and more disgusting, dirty, business activities, even though it's a decreasing amount of money that they're getting for it, which I find just like particularly fucking crazy. And so when I read this portion of the, that Forbes article, that's what I'm hearing, is that it's describing the tendency of the rate of profit to fall. So the reason that I found it to be so fascinating that the Forbes article said "gentlemen at the gates" was because there was a book and then a movie made about this particular deal called Barbarian at the Gates that was specifically about this RJR Nabisco leverage buyout. So this happened in the 1980s. I would love to read real quickly from this Washington Post article from November 4th, 1988. And it reads, RJR's managers raised bid to $20.7 billion. Now, if we do the BLS inflation calculator on that, again, this is 1988 dollars. I don't even think the inflation calculator goes that high, but we'll give it a go. In 1988, I got to lose some zeros here. In today's dollars, that would be $48.8 billion on just this one deal. And it reads as the following. It says RJR, and so for the record, RJR was RJ Reynolds, which was a tobacco company. And at some point there was a merger. It wasn't this from Virginia, RJ Reynolds?
I think they're
or was it North Carolina?
I think they're North Carolina.
North Carolina, right.
Let me see. Reynolds might be in Winston-Salem, North Carolina.
Right.
Yeah.
So RJ Reynolds merged at some point with the Nabisco Corporation, again, in like some fucking mad, insane corporate synergy bullshit. Again, in like the mid 20th century. And so it reads here, RJR Nabisco's management upped the ante in the most expensive bidding contest in corporate history yesterday by offering $20.7 billion for the Atlanta-based food and cigarette company. It's just so crazy. So again, the management is looking to bid on the company. The management group's new bid, coming 2 weeks after it began the battle for control of RJR, turned the heat back on Kohlberg Kravis Roberts and Company, KKR, the New York leverage buyout firm that had offered $20.3 billion for the maker of Camel cigarettes and Oreo cookies. Oh, God. The RJR Group said in its new offer, worth $84 per share in cash and $8 in IOUs. I still don't even understand what that means. KKR said the offer it made last week is worth about $90 per share in cash and securities, although analysts say it's valued at $79 share in cash and $10 in paper. As such, The new offer apparently accomplishes the RJR Management Group's goal of offering more cash than KKR. Professional stock traders who own a large portion of RJR stock prefer to receive more cash up front because securities may present a higher risk. What that means is like they just want to be paid for their stocks that they own and not be, continue to own the stocks post-sale because who the fuck knows what's going to happen. The new bid would make RJR more than 50% more expensive than the second most expensive takeover in history, which was Chevron Corporation's buyout of Gulf in 1984. This is like, this is like a time capsule to me. Like where you're just like looking back in history and just seeing like, oh yeah, maybe, yeah, why did I all of a sudden not see any Gulf stations anymore or whatever and see more Chevron? It's because of these fucking leverage buyout bullshits. Talks aimed at a possible compromise between the two sets of bidders apparently broke off yesterday. F. Ross Johnson, RJR's chief executive, who is leading the management group in conjunction with Shearson, Lehman, Hutton, and Solomon Brothers. Again, it's just like all these fucking 1980s like mega Wall Street shit. They've repeatedly met during the past 2 weeks with KKR partner Henry Kravis and KKR's advisors, but he's been unable to strike a deal. Again, so this was all in the 1980s. This was all in 1988. So in retrospect, and I'm just going to put a little like clarity on this, the RJR Nabisco thing, they explain in the Forbes article that we had been listening to, I'm just going to cut in and so we can read from this here. It says, KKR, of course, popularized the leverage buyout in the 1970s and 80s and became the face of Wall Street's conquest of corporate America. Forever known as Barbarians, after the best-selling book that chronicled their $25 billion takeover of RJR Nabisco, KKR was grilled by Congress for tax avoidance and the aggressive use of debt as they swallowed up RJR and other corporate giants of yesteryear like Wometco Enterprises and Beatrice Foods. Again, never some, names we would never hear about because of these corporate buyouts. These leverage buyouts. So, I say that to say that like this has gotten so progressively worse over time. Not just because, they've just upped the ante and these leverage buyouts are continuously getting bigger and bigger, but it's also because they're not even making as much money on it as they used to do in, the 1970s and 80s. And so in order to make up for that lack of profit, they're just having to continuously do bigger and bigger, fucking draconian things at, business activities at the companies that they purchase because they're just not making money on the actual business activities that they're involved in. So I just, Chris specifically, I just in the way that they, again, going back to the way that they diversify their portfolios to do more and more fucking, exploitative things to continue to prop up their rates of return for themselves and their investors. I found a very curious name attached to the group, which is one that we haven't heard in a while. David Petraeus.
Okay.
David Petraeus. All right,
let's hear it out. Yeah.
Well, David Petraeus.
Petraeus. You remember that?
Yes. Who did that, though?
Oh, it must have been the Post.
Yeah, Petraeus. Oh, God. For those of you that maybe aren't familiar with who David Petraeus is, he was a longtime, God, the fucking
actually it was moveon.org.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they took out a full page ad in the New York Times. The headline that said referred to Petraeus as General Betray Us.
Ooh, burn! Got him.
Which is pretty good.
So what he took over as head general over Afghanistan after Stanley McChrystal had a boys' weekend in Paris. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
It's so insane that I even just if you even just listen to that sentence, but if you're not familiar, look it up because you're in for a treat. Basically, Dave Petraeus then became CIA director under Obama, and he had an affair with his biographer.
Yeah, he was only CIA director for I'm not even sure it was a year.
I think you're right. And even then, I think I remember it was something like he would correspond with her by going into a Gmail account and writing an email and leaving it in the drafts. And then she would read it and then delete it. And then she would write an email in the drafts and he would log in at a certain time. And that's how he thought he was going to circumvent the kind of NSA, right?
That's OPSEC. That's OPSEC right there.
And guess what happened? Turns out he gave her classified information.
Yeah.
And which he was at some point recommended to be, charged with federal felonies for this. But it ended up being a misdemeanor and he served no time. Anyway.
It's crazy how that works, yeah.
It's funny how that works. Well, you put in a lot of public service.
Sure, you deserve a break.
So I'm just going to read here from the Associated Press from 2013. It says, retired Army General David Petraeus will take a new job with investment firm Kohlberg, Kravis, and Roberts Company, LP, as he attempts to rebuild his reputation after an extramarital affair with a biographer triggered his resignation.
He's taking some time off to spend more time with his leveraged buyouts.
That's the best way to repair your reputation in the public's eye.
Yeah.
So what is he doing for KKR? Petraeus, 60 years old, will serve as chairman of the New York firm's newly created KKR Global Institute. Now, you wonder what that is, and you go to their website, and it's all very vague. And I watched a kind of like, one of those little, like you were watching, like the Bloomberg Quick Take, but this was something that was put on the KKR Global Institute website of just this little 2-minute conversation between Henry Kravis and David Petraeus. And they're just talking in these weird vagaries where they're just like, well, it's a lot of, synergies between, individual investors and institutions and making sure that we can, leverage the amount of know-how and knowledge that, both you and Roberts have, blah, blah, blah. It's all very vague. And there's one thing that he says where you start to like see a little bit of, you're reading between the lines here. And Petraeus says, there are countries I've visited and wonder why there aren't U.S. investors here. And then you start to think about, well, what are the countries he's visited, perhaps, in the last decade or so? And obviously, he's talking about like a place like Afghanistan. And why aren't there U.S. investors here? And he even mentions like oil and fossil fuels. And Henry Kravis says, it'll give us a real advantage from an investor's standpoint. So what they're saying is, and the entire reason he's hired is to explore other insane exploitative ways to make investors shareholder value. And if that means hiring a disgraced fucking former CIA officer and 4-star general, so be it. You give him a good salary and he'll be there. Like that to me is like, when I saw that name attached to this place, I was like, oh, these people are fucking deranged. These people are fucking sick. And I'm just going back to this.
That's like the you can't get the ones who are like retiring honorably from the military, right? Because those are getting hoovered up by fucking Lockheed and General Atomics or whatever. So you go for like the low shelf, like NatSec, connected people. Exactly. It's like who can we get on a budget,
dude? Fucking that's what we talked about that. When we did Bridgewater Associates with Alexandra Skaggs and fucking James Comey was their general counsel. Oh God damn it. So again, if in an effort to kind of like wrap this up, I think, what to me is kind of crazy about these things is that there isn't like these fantastical, sensational, like, you're not getting any fucking Rudy Giuliani moments out of this bullshit. But what you are getting are these like alleged to be malevolent forces that are owning increasing portions of our economy and just selling it for parts and destroying it. Again, what they do is not additive. It does not add to our economy. It doesn't make like, even if you were to think about it like cynically, like fucking David Petraeus, like you think about like national security, making the country stronger. Well, motherfucker, this makes it worse. This makes it weaker. Like if you put people out on their ass because you want to, go 0.1 more of a percentage point for an investor and, you lay off 30,000 people. Well, that's bad for the country. Like that's bad for America. That's bad for like the global economy and like the working class is to just make them poorer and less secure in their fucking station on Maslow's hierarchy. That's the part to me that I just find to be fucking so jarring, especially when thinking about like the fact that they're just increasing the amounts of fucking leverage buyouts that they're doing. These people are sick is what I'm trying to say. And so rich. So like so rich. Like, I don't know if you saw, like, there was like another article where they talk about, like, you know, a long mahogany doorway and a special elevator and blah blah blah, and eventually this boardroom. It's like these people just like live in a completely fucking different world than we do, and so of course they don't have any fucking tether to reality and give Donald Trump $1 million.
Yeah. I mean, Kravis is worth what, like several $1 billion.
Oh yeah.
Yes. Hold on, I saw a recent figure. Let me see.
I'm looking at it right now. It's so bad.
What is it?
$8.5 billion.
$8.5 billion. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh fuck! As a side note, I saw this statistic earlier. Just again, like just in no other reason, just fucking billionaire hate. That Mark Zuckerberg. Did you guys see this? Mark Zuckerberg. What is it? Has 2% of all millennial wealth.
Well, I was actually thinking about that earlier today because I saw there was some article that was posted by one of those fucking, again, I'm sure it was one of those awful fucking rags like Bloomberg or Forbes or something, but it was like, the headline of it was like, the average millennial has $55,000 in their savings account.
Oh, yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
Well, you
go fuck
maybe if you include Zuckerberg in the...
What the fuck is a savings account?
Oh, God.
I mean, a lot of people were calling that out and saying, like, what's the median?
Right?
Exactly.
That's the actual tell. The mean, the actual statistical mean is meaningless because the top 0.1% of that is going to have the overwhelming share of all of it.
I think maybe this is just like, you know, fake news or whatever, but I remember hearing in college that it was like the average salary for a geology major was like $250,000 per year, and that was because Michael Jordan majored in geology when he was at UNC. he's like a billionaire, whatever. But yeah, of course, yeah, exactly. It completely skews it. And just to put it into perspective, Mark Zuckerberg owns 1 out of every $50 of millennial wealth, right? 2%, right? That makes sense. Fucking sick. So again, you know, these things just have no in any just economy. These business activities would be fucking illegal. Should be illegal to do these things.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about this a long time ago when we were talking about the sort of logic of financialization that really started to take hold in the 70s and 80s onward. I mean, it's always like present in and always has been present in capitalism, like the logic, like constant reinvestment for the purposes of getting like short-term profit. But there's a specific like approach of financialization, which I think KKR is really emblematic of, which is just like literally stripping everything down for parts, buying something, tearing it up to pieces, not thinking at all about any long-term like utility of the thing, and really just like get as much money as you can. And the example I brought up a long time ago is like, you know, imagine if, you know, you live in an apartment or a house or whatever, and you have certain items around the house, like, I don't know, like cleaning supplies or maintenance supplies. I think the example I used was like a hammer, right? Let's say you need a hammer for something. So you go out, you buy a hammer for $10, and then you accomplish whatever task you needed to do with that hammer. Most people, right, I think the reasonable assumption, right, if you're able to get the object to begin with, is to be like, oh, you know what, I'm going to hold on to this. I might need this later. Like, this was a $10 purchase, and now I have a hammer, or I have a set of tools, or whatever. The financial logic is like, no, sell that back. Like, sell it back for,
exactly.
You know, and whatever, you take a loss on it, so you did the job, now sell it back for $9, and just wait. And that's how you end up in a situation where everything is just like pushed to its fucking extreme. There is no back room. There is no safety net, both on a social level, but also like in these companies, right? You just strip every potential little bit out of it. You repackage it, you shove it away, you resell it, try to make it profitable. And inevitably that involves like layoffs or stagnant wages or even declining wages like you were talking about. And that's the logic of it, and that's how they get money. It's literally just like piracy.
Yes,
it's like financial piracy. It's just like going in and stealing and reorganizing all the shit is there to make a quick buck, and then getting rid of it because they don't hold on to these companies long term.
No.
The whole point is to repackage them and split them up into a million different little pieces and then sell them off.
Correct. God, it's so fucked up, dude. It's so fucked up. Again, these fucking firms should be illegal. They should be illegal. There's no reason that these firms should be allowed to exist. Anyway, listen, we'll just have to... All right, let's stop it here. That's enough.
Good night.
That's enough. You know who these people are. You know what to do. All right, everybody, stay cool. And
they all have addresses. Good night, everybody.
It wasn't Colorado, but you might have found somebody else. Goodbye. Stay cool. Goodbye.
We never thought we'd have to say goodbye. Well, here we are now. Over half a century of fun and happy smiles. It really makes you wonder how you could treat your